confusion about this for Americans. And I'll say this not just as a United States Senator, not just as a patriot who would die for my own country, but I'm going to say this as a Black man. When you're Black in America, you understand the vulnerability within your own country you love. I saw it as an adult on January 6th. The people that stormed the Capitol, talked to Capitol Police or African Americans. They had signs of hatred, Confederate flags, the vicious, racist things they were saying to Capitol Police officers. But side by side, those symbols of hate towards Black Americans were shirts like Camp Auschwitz shirts. Hate has an indiscriminate infection. This is why, as an American, as a Black American, I will always stand against hate and stand with the people who are targets of hate. Just like the Nazis, who didn't just destroy 6 million Jews, they destroyed gay people, gypsies. I will stand with people who are targets of hate. Hamas, like the Nazis and like ISIS, are people who target with hate. I stand with Jews. I stand with Muslims. I stand with gay folks. I stand with people right now who all have a common cause to stand against Hamas, because Hamas is an indiscriminately hateful people who do not want peace. They want to destroy others and stop us from having peace. This is not complicated, America. It is not complicated. We all must denounce hate and those people who use hate to destroy. That is Hamas. And so I am worried right now. I'm worried about rising anti-Semitism in the United States. I led with 3 other senators, bipartisan, to call for more resources, because hate is indiscriminate in its efforts. The same hate that killed Blacks in a church in South Carolina are the same people who are wielding the same hate that killed in a synagogue. And so we all need to take an understanding. Everyone has a responsibility to condemn the hatred of this ISIS Nazi like Hamas and do everything we can to try to get us back to peace, to affirming of human rights for all people in that region. And again, the protection of this country and this country's, unfortunately, too often targets of hate.
These Negro imperialists, the Negro capitalists, how the Black community, especially in the establishment, essentially abandoned our Black revolutionary tradition. They abandoned the tradition of Malcolm X, MLK, Fred Hampton, for example, and embraced neoliberalism. They are our number one enemies in our community. The same way you see these Chinese Americans that go on CNN and tell the audience why we need to go to war with China. You know how the establishment recruits people from disenfranchised community, and then they use our struggle in order to justify imperialism. Cory Booker there is using Black struggle and the Black language in order to justify Israeli slaughter of the Palestinian people. Does it get more disgusting than that? You have 1,000 Palestinian children I saw this morning dead. But Cory Booker is going to justify that using the language of the Black struggle. Who's more evil than that? I'm asking you guys that question sincerely, but I want to bring our guest in. That's just my opening thoughts. CJ, feel free to chime in, but this is a good way to introduce our guest, someone who spoke and wrote a lot about this issue, an international human rights activist, organizer, amazing writer, national organizer for Black for Peace. Great to have you on, Ajamu Baraka. Thank you for making time.
Thank you.
Glad to be here. Really appreciate your inviting me back and ready for this conversation, a very important one.
Yeah, I want to get first reaction. I know you got a lot of questions.
Yes, go ahead.
But I want your general reaction to that clip of Cory Booker and what I was speaking on as well regarding these shields for imperialism, these shields for the establishment known as the Black Congressional Caucus and their supporters. What's your general reaction to that clip? Thank you for joining once again.
Well, I'm not surprised. I mean, that's the nature of Cory Booker. Cory Booker is a particularly strange, but yet relatively consistent kind of Negro. He represents the kind of Negro leadership that has resulted from what Pascal Roberts refers to as the 50-year counter-revolution in the U.S. These are the kinds of neoliberal servants to white power that the system wanted to produce. They wanted to make sure that there'll be would never be another generation that came out of the 1960s and 70s. In fact, what they wanted to produce was what Cory Booker identified with, and that is an American. The counter-revolutionary process, the ideological component of it had a cultural component also, and that was to in fact produce an American with an American consciousness, and I'm using American in a negative way, an American consciousness, American worldview, sensitivity, sensibility, a loyal servant to white nationalism. So it's not surprising that Cory Booker and the rest of the Negroes in the Congressional Black Caucus, which is now a right-wing institution, will firmly embrace the perspectives, the positions of the Israeli fascists, reflecting what I believe to be the right-wing character of U.S. society in general, and specifically the right-wing character of much of what is seen as the Black leadership class in this country. So it's pathetic. He stands with everybody but the Palestinians. So basically the kind of dehumanization that we see that these gangsters are involved in to justify, to make the Palestinians killable. You got these kinds of Negroes trying to embrace and use the moral authority of Black resistance to give merit to that kind of backwardness. Is despicable.
Now you've kind of already sort of answered this, not maybe in a linear way, but can you, because I got this term from you, or we're using this term as a tweet we saw from you, and I'll bring that up in a little bit, but what do you define as a Negro servant, for those that may not know in our audience?
Well, a Negro now is used as a derogatory term for an individual, a fully colonized individual who has no self-dignity, who craves, who needs the validation from the colonial master, who has no idea and no objective about what it means to try to acquire independent power, who believes that self-determination for Black and colonized people is some kind of unrealizable dream, or something that's not even really desirable. It is someone who, as Malcolm described, if the master's plantation house is on fire, he or she will fight the fire harder than master. But those of us who understand who we are and our relationship to colonial power, as we watch the house burning, we are praying, as Malcolm said, we're praying for a strong wind. Okay, so these are the servants of white power. These are the servants of the colonial capitalist system. These are the individuals tasked with the responsibility of making sure that, in fact, we stay on the plantation.
People like this, who we categorize in this category of Negro servant, why does it get such a gut reaction from radicals like yourself, like Margaret Kimberly? Like, it's such a like a knee-jerk gut reaction. Can you speak to that? Why do we have that sort of reaction?
Well, partly, I mean, I speak to myself, partly because, you know, I had an opportunity to actually grow up at a period where we really believed that we could win. We really believed that it was only a matter of time and building that we would be able to defeat this colonial project. There's no question about that in our minds, okay? If someone would have told me in 1973 that in 2023, we would have Negroes like Cory Booker that we'll still be in a settler colonial project, that the U.S. will still be running things globally, we would have thought that either this person was a fool or an agent. Okay. So the fact that this is where we are today, to see where our people are at, to see where the Black radical movement is a very painful thing. It's a very painful thing. But what offsets some of this, though, is that those of us who never gave up, as we continue to build and build organization, we have formations like the Black Alliance of Peace and others, where young people are gravitating to and learning how to engage in more effective struggle, who have not swallowed the line, where we see shows like this and young cats like you all, it gives us hope, but to see a trader like this pig and others, and to know we can't touch them at this point. Yeah, it is a very gut-wrenching kind of experience.
Can't touch him. I love that.
Yeah,
Can you?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Nick. I'll let you squeeze in. Let me just get one more question before I pass it to you.
Go ahead.
This is a hot topic because what you said. I just don't want you to lose your train of thought on this, Ajamu. Why did you have that sense of belief during that time? What did you see? What was going on where nobody could tell you there's no way that we're not going to reach our goal, the promised land in a certain, maybe not in a defined amount of years, but you just knew it was coming. What were you seeing at that time? And at what point did you sort of see a decline? Was it the Reagan era? Was it pre-Reagan? Like, can you speak to both of those points? And then I'll pass.
No, that's a good question. And I come out the Black Liberation Movement. I consider myself a veteran of the Black Liberation Movement who's never surrendered. And so as a young man and growing up in like Southside Chicago, where people like Fred Hampton were actually real, seeing the development of our people's movement, of going into the military at a very young age and becoming even more further radicalized by young men who were serious about change, to see the character of our people, and to understand and see the weaknesses of the enemy, and to understand too that we're part not only of a struggle in the U.S., but that we're part of a global struggle, and there was momentum that we have momentum globally among African people, among the colonized, and we had them on the defensive. That's why there was a self-conscious decision made by the bourgeoisie, symbolized by that infamous Lewis Powell memo that came out in 1971, that basically told the bourgeoisie, if y'all want to maintain this thing, you better be prepared to fight. Okay, so the momentum was with us, even though we were suffering body blows. The FBI was systematically murdering people across the country in 1970, 1971, going into 1972. Okay, but we understood that is the price of liberation, and we understood that we were on the right side of history. So we were absolutely clear that we continue to build, that we can win more people over to struggle, that we can build stronger structures and institutions, and that we in fact could, with the balance of power shifting toward us, even though we were a minority, we understood that we represented the interests of a majority because we had a class analysis also. We believed that we can win. It wasn't really until, it wasn't really until the 1980s, after Reagan came into power, after we saw the liberals really begin to shift toward the right, when we saw seeing how difficult it was to reconsolidate, is when I began to see that we had some issues. The 1980s, part of the inability to reconsolidate the Black left was that we got consumed with a good portion of the 1980s with Jesse Jackson's bullshit. Some of us completely opposed Jesse's thing in 1983, 1984 as a diversion. Okay, but we also were developing certain kinds of awareness, and so some of us began to see that, hey, wait a minute. We can't will this thing back into existence in terms of us having a kind of independent revolutionary presence. We're going to have to rebuild. If millions of our people are in this electoral bullshit, then for us to stand aloof from it is objectively reactionary. Okay, so we've got to figure out how and if we can we could use this thing to
Absolutely.
to be in contact with our people, to engage in political education, to build institutions. So by 1988, when Jesse came back again, some of us were basically supporting that idea. And the objective was this. And I was naive enough to believe that Jesse was serious about independent power. We thought that if we propped up this Rainbow Coalition thing and this run for Jesse in '88, that when the white bosses in the Democratic Party would not give Jesse the nomination, or wouldn't put him on the ticket as the VP because he came in second to Dukakis, we thought Jesse would march black people out the Democrat Party.
So you saw the mistake our generation made a long time ago. That's so interesting.
Wow, you must have saw Bernie Sanders coming, or maybe you had an inkling at some point because you had to have deja vu. I can see it on your face. But continue with your answer if you wanted to finish there. Go ahead.
Yeah, so basically that it was all strategy and tactics, and so we thought this was going to happen. It didn't happen, of course, because Jesse wasn't about real power. In fact, Jesse, I was literally in some of those smoke-filled rooms in Atlanta at the convention when Jesse basically sold the people out for some money and access to a plane.
So familiar.
Yeah, and so by 1992, and he already had basically told the Democratic Party bosses he was not going to run, and so they were going to give it to Bill Clinton. And the rest is history. So and Jesse was irrelevant in my opinion ever since. He systematically dismantled that Rainbow Coalition. That was it for Jesse Jackson. So yeah, we made mistakes. Okay, no question about that. Okay, but we always felt that you cannot hold yourself aloof from where the masses of the people are. And so we've been looking at ways that we can in fact do that. We kind of left alone for a while. For me, it wasn't really until the last decade or so when folks like Chokwe Lumumba and others began to talk about how we should reevaluate this. And when Chokwe ran in Jackson, we helped with that campaign to become a part of the city council. We began to see that there was some space there, and so he couldn't be criticized or condemned as some kind of bougie Negro. You couldn't condemn the new African peoples, the Republic of New Africa, or the New African Peoples Organization, or the Malcolm X movement as being Negroes. This was a strategic move that was being made to ground what they considered to be the Kush Project. So that opened up the space for more sophisticated discussions and analysis of what this bourgeois electoral arena might offer, and also to continue to talk about the dangers of it also.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Nick. You wanted to jump in.
One thing I want to add to this, and CJ, let me know how you're doing, Tonk. I know you have.
Yeah, I got to jet and get my daughter in a little bit. Yeah.
We also have a post-duopoly tonight as well that CJ will be hosting. So we got a lot of great content.
Doing some stuff tonight too
as well. So I'm going to shift to the conflict in Palestine, what's going on in Palestine. But regarding the Negro servants topic, you had Colin Powell, who once made one hell of a admittance once, where you were trying to explain to his white audience why racism doesn't exist in America. He was like, well, racism doesn't exist in America. All you gotta do, look at me. If you join the military, if you become a police officer, you can escape racism, you can climb the social ladder. So what is he saying? He's saying the system is so broken, in order to make it as a black man, you must be willing to implement state violence on your own people or other black and colonized people in the world. That's how you make it. Or you can also start a small business where you exploit other black capital, black labor, I should say. So even in that speech, he didn't even mean to say it. The ruling class will admit the best way to make it as a black man in this country is sell your own people. And you've seen this throughout time. It's nothing new. Even W.B. Du Bois, who had a lot of liberal tendencies, he famously called this out in the speech. I say all the time. Yeah, Malcolm X, Fred Hampton, it's been a plague in our community. That's why it's important that we have people like Ajamu. That's why I continue to call it out.